Another thing that's changed since the last time we made a video is we found a lipstick that's actually bear proof. There are no allergens in this lipstick, and it's not made from any fruit that's like highly pollinated, like no berries. It's just like a natural mineral powdered red. And I saw it and I was like, yes, that is what I need. I need a lipstick. I don't know why I need a lipstick. I don't wear makeup because our skin is very reactive. And so I bought it, and then I told my partner, I was like, oh yeah, look, I got a lipstick. Look at the ingredients. Like, look, this is actually a bear proof lipstick. And they were like, you know what I read today? And I was like, okay, slight detour from the lipstick conversation. And they were like, I just read an article. And it's like this whole thing about how like the mark of like a recession is when people go out and start buying lipstick, specifically red lipstick as well. And I was like, wow, it's great to see that I am still one of the herd and that I am still a basic bitch. Hello everybody, it is Opal, Jing and Bear from the Pomegranate System. If you're new, welcome, hi, we have DID. If you don't know what that is, that's fine, just roll with it for now. It is not important to understand the context of this video, in which we will be giving you 10 book recommendations for when your faith in humanity is rapidly declining. I don't think I really need to explain why we're doing this video. If you just look outside your window, like I feel like you might understand why I think this video might be helpful in current recent times. We haven't picked that many, so don't freak out. It's not going to be an overwhelming list. It's 10 books and 5 categories. So I've picked 2 books for each category, and I'll break down a little summary of why I think this book is like a hopeful, inspires that kind of introspective, oh wow, I'm a human and I'm part of this amazing thing on a massive floating rock in space. You know what I mean? Like, you know when you read a book or you watch a film and you go, wow, humanity's kind of cool. Not all the time, because then you know, go outside and you see the horrors. But every now and again, I do feel quite proud to be a human, especially in stories where we all kind of come together and work together and help each other, and that kind of selflessness. And I think the 10 books that we've picked tackle different elements of that. And we'd like this to be an open conversation as well. So if you have other books that you think inspire hope or inspire this kind of camaraderie and humanity, and this kind of emphasis of like, actually, if we all work together, life could be a lot better, and it's not one of the books that we've mentioned, pop them in the comments below so that everyone can kind of have a collective discussion as well. So the 5 categories go like this. We have classics, we have young adult fiction, we have against all odds fiction, whimsy fiction, and then a category I'm calling understanding therapy, as in other people who aren't in therapy can understand those who go to therapy better, and those who are in therapy can understand and resonate with the journey of the protagonists of those 2 books. Let's get started. Classics. The 2 classics that we've chosen, you can't see it on the red book, but from the spine, are Little Women by Louisa May Alcott, and The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. 2 very loved, very well known, very respected books. Also, both of these books have multiple film adaptations, film/TV show adaptations. Obviously, my favourite of Little Women is Greta Gerwig's Little Women. I think no one else has managed to capture the essence of what Louisa was trying to do. And also, I love the 2 perspective timeline, and I love that Greta has given us a tangible explanation of the ending of Jo's story, because it didn't make sense when you read this book and you're like, huh, that came out of nowhere. But Greta's given us an incredibly realistic kind of reason as to why Jo's story ended up the way it did in the book. The reason why we put Little Women on this list isn't just because it's one of our favourite books of all time, it is our favourite classic. Full stop, it is our favourite classic. We really resonate with the character of Jo. I feel like that's obvious if you've watched our content for a while now, if you've seen a couple of videos. Obviously, not just the writing stuff, but the kind of strong-headedness and the way that Jo really gets kind of these bouts of like just explosion of not being able to cope with something. Her emotional regulation isn't great, but she tries really hard, and then by the end of the book, she's a lot more regulated and she can form secure attachments, and she's really just trying hard to be a good person. And I think that this book is so important as well because it just is so domestic. And it just reminds you that at one point the Western world was intergenerational as well, and we like actually looked out for each other. Like before capitalism, before the capitalist hellscape, we actually relied on our communities and our families and our friends, and the camaraderie between the siblings and every character around them is just so important. And I feel like that's something that's still done and still kind of cherished in Eastern culture. Having lived in China, I say that quite confidently. Intergenerational households and care and just like looking out for each other and everyone working together. Whereas I feel like the West is very much, especially in the 21st century, it's gotten even worse with social media, very individualistic. And we don't really care about anyone else other than ourselves. So if the hope that you're looking for is kind of like this nostalgic, like I think humanity's regressed in some ways, and I need kind of like a message or a sign that it actually has not regressed that far, and humans will always have some sort of crises and will always be able to overcome it. Little Women. I feel like it's also a great book for anyone who's kind of worried about the next generation, like Gen Z and Gen Alpha. If you're worried for like the youth of today, don't be. There are some really great lessons in Little Women. I wanted to read out page 111. The context for this passage is that Marmee, the mother, and Hannah, the housekeeper slash cook, they have left and gone on their own, and they've left the 4 girls to their own devices. And of course, when you leave children to do whatever they want, of course they're just going to play and have a good time. And the lesson here is about hard work and the merits of hard work and how humans intrinsically want to work. I get so annoyed being on the disability pension where when we were posting TikToks, and there would be comments being like, oh, it must be fun to not work all day, and you know, all this taxpayer money going towards your pension. And it's like, you don't understand. Humans intrinsically want to work. Think about COVID, when working stopped and everyone had to stop, everyone was like, yeah, fuck, this is awesome. And then after a week, you're kind of like, I am so bored. And I think this book really encapsulates that, like, humans want to work and work looks differently for everyone. When I say work, I don't associate that with a desk job. I mean doing a task that benefits other people, not just yourself. That's working to me. Mother, did you go away and let everything be just to see how we'd get on? Cried Meg, who had had suspicions all day. Yes, I wanted you to see how the comfort of all depends on each doing her share faithfully. While Hannah and I did your work, you got on pretty well, though I don't think you were very happy or amiable. So I thought, as a little lesson, I would show you what happens when everyone thinks only of herself. Don't you feel that it is pleasanter to help one another, to have daily duties which make leisure sweet when it comes, and to bear and forbear that home may be comfortable and lovely to us all? We do, Mother, we do, cried the girls. Then let me advise you to take up your little burdens again, for though they seem heavy sometimes, they are good for us, and lighten as we learn to carry them. Work is wholesome, and there is plenty for everyone. It keeps us from ennui and mischief, is good for health and spirits, and gives us the sense of power and independence better than money or fashion. We'll work like bees and love it too. See if we don't, said Joe. I'll learn plain cooking for my holiday task, and the next dinner party I shall be a success. I'll make a set of shirts for Father instead of letting you do it, Marmee. I can and I will, though I'm not fond of sewing. That will be better than fussing over my own things, which are plenty nice enough as they are, said Meg. While Amy followed their example by heroically declaring, I shall learn to make buttonholes and attend to my parts of speech. Very good. Then I am quite satisfied with the experiment and fancy that we shall not have to repeat it. Only don't go to the other extreme. Have regular hours for work and play, make each day both useful and pleasant, and prove that you understand the worth of time by employing it well. Then youth will be delightful, old age will bring few regrets, and life becomes a beautiful success in spite of poverty. We'll remember mother, and they did. I don't know, it just makes you feel good. It's just like, yes, there are reasons as to why things happen. There are reasons why life is hard. There are reasons why we work hard. And like Jing said, work looks differently for everyone. I feel like, you know, making YouTube videos, making someone's day, that's work. Going to our GP and to all these specialists. Our presentation is kind of adding to the current developing research of different disorders and presentations and case studies. Like, we are doing our part in society. Even though some might not think of what we do as like hard work, like obviously it can be hard for us, it's quite exhausting actually, but it's still value. There's still value in what we're doing and what we consider work, and like just the small things and how they add up and how we all work together. That's what this book is about. That's how we interpret the text, and that's why it's really, really hopeful and on our list. The other classic on our list, The Count of Monte Cristo. Like all classics, it cannot be read through a lens of the 21st century, especially not through the lens of 2025. There is an inappropriate romantic age gap at the end, which, you know, if you're not used to reading classics, obviously we have a creative writing degree, so we had to learn where stories come from and like what already exists and the merit of what already exists. And so when you're reading a classic, you really have to read it through the lens of the year that it was published. And if you think, well, what's the point? If the characters don't really measure up in a 2025 lens, isn't then it irrelevant? And the answer is no. The answer is no. The reason why classics remain relevant is not the characters. Like, the characters are just kind of props. If you think about classics, you think characters are props. What matters is the story, the lessons that are taught, if you will. Count of Monte Cristo, if you are unfamiliar, it's most commonly labeled as a revenge story, but it really is about the lengths at which one will go to be perceived in the correct light, and how frustrating it can be to have everyone point the finger at you and say that you did something when you didn't do it. It's really frustrating, and like obviously something you want to rectify, but it's not something that can always happen straight away. Sometimes what you have to do is just wait and hope, and that's one of the most famous lines of this book. It's the last line in the book. "Who knows whether we shall ever see them again," said Moral, wiping away a tear. "My dear," replied Valentine, "has not the Count just told us that all human wisdom is contained in the words wait and hope?" The lesson of this classic is really just time gives you opportunities, and there's no point being frustrated in the current if there's nothing you can do and no circumstances provided to you where you can change something. And so sometimes when you like everything is coming down on you, it's easy to just go, you know what, I'm gonna give up. That's kind of natural in a way for your mind to start going down that path. But The Count of Monte Cristo reminds us that time doesn't necessarily heal all wounds, but time as it progresses provides different opportunities, different circumstances that you can utilize to get yourself out of the hole. It's basically like when Taylor Swift said in Evermore, in Long Story Short, and she's just like talking to her past self, and she's like, your enemies will defeat themselves before you have the chance to swing. And it's like, there's no point getting upset at other people and trying to clear your name at the start when everything's coming down on you, because it doesn't matter, because people's ears aren't open. They're not open to trying to hear what you have to say or to hear your side of the story. So sometimes the best thing you can do is wait and hope. And look, everything has sorted itself out. People reveal their true colors. You get offered a position, changes the way people perceive you, and then you can go back in time and tell your perspective of the story. Like, that's why classics are taught, and that's why this book is on our hope list. Not just because of the quote, wait and hope, but also because I do really feel like sometimes when you're feeling hopeless, something you have to remind yourself is, okay, time will fix this. Time will fix this. It might not heal, but it can provide opportunities to fix what you're feeling. And that's why it's on the list. Young adult fiction, we've got The Hunger Games and The Host by Stephanie Meyer. Other people might not find it hopeful. I know there are a lot of people who are just like, Bear, this book is about children killing each other. That's not really a hopeful vibe. And it's like, okay, but if we consider the series like as a collective, cohesive story narrative, this book is hopeful because even in a dystopian hellscape, there are people trying to dismantle it from the outside, from the inside, as we learn in Sunrise on the Reaping. Like, even when it feels like you're looking around and you're going, can no one else see what's going on? Are we just going to let that happen? Should I just conform and do what everyone else is doing? Should I just be acting that way even though it doesn't align with my values and what I'm seeing right now? Or should I continue to be myself, even though that does socially ostracize me from the herd? Like, is there merit to that? And the answer is yes. A lot of people find Katniss unlikable. Yes, correct. She is not personable because she has PTSD. She has CPTSD. It's trauma reoccurring over a long period of time, her entire life practically. She almost dies from starvation, her dad gets blown up in a mine, like her mum goes catatonic, so it's almost like she has no one and she's forced to become the adult and take care of her sister, and then she has to participate in the games. And so even though she's living in a world that doesn't care about her, she still finds something to hold on to, and that's her sister. And yes, her sister does end up dying in Mockingjay, but like Suzanne Collins said, that's the whole point. The whole point is to exist and to rebel without purpose and without getting knocked back, like Haymitch got knocked back and Lenore Dove died, and then he still kept going and still kept fighting, even though he was kind of a passive participant until Katniss. Everyone plays their part in dismantling oppression. And that's why I love this book so much. I find hope in this. When I'm feeling hopeless, I put on the films. Genuinely, I put on the films and I'm just like, it doesn't matter that I'm feeling like I'm in a system where I can't control anything at the top, because by doing my part and by everyone doing their part, and I have to trust that there are other people out there doing their part, it will eventually collapse and there will be an era of peace. The Host. Oh my God, this book. Stephanie Meyer, if you've never heard of her, yes you have. She wrote Twilight. And everyone, you know, knows about Twilight, and not many people know about The Host. And I remember when they made this into a movie, I saw an interview where Stephanie was on set for the movie and they were asking her about like, where did this come from? And she was like, I was so frustrated with writing Eclipse. It was in the editing process of Eclipse. And Stephanie was like, I didn't want the love triangle, and the execs kept on shoving the love triangle into Eclipse, and we kept on going back and forth with the editing. And then I thought, you know what, I need a new project that's just mine, because when I write Breaking Dawn, the fourth book of Twilight, it's going to go through that same fucking flip-flop. And she ended up writing The Host, and this is what I refer to as Stephanie Meyer's magnum opus. I don't think she's ever going to write another book better than this. If she writes another book ever, it is not Twilight. I think Twilight is a great pop culture phenomenon, and like, it's so embedded in society, and that's awesome. The Host, oh my God, this book. First of all, it is thick. Second of all, it is a standalone. At one point, I think she was going to make it into a series, but again, knowing what she said about execs, I think they were probably pressuring her to make it into a series. It ties up all of its loose ends. There's no opening for a series, in my opinion, and I'm glad that it's a once-off. Also, side note, it's probably the closest representation for DID. Like, just genuinely, like, the amount of times dissociative identity disorder is portrayed in movies and it's just inaccurate. Like, this is why I say just roll with it, because there's no point Googling, there's no point asking ChatGPT if that's how you get your information, because 99% of what's online and even from the mouth of psychiatrists and psychologists is irrelevant. Like, you should get your information from systems, not from people perceiving them, if that makes sense. But being in the head of someone with two states of consciousness, there's Melanie and then there's Wanderer, and they're both separate states in the same mind. Oh my God. Now imagine that, but like 50 people. But instead of Wanderer being like inserted into the brain, imagine like baby's consciousness, like this giant infinite ball of light, and then through trauma, it cracks into certain shapes and elements and they all go off and form their own consciousness. That's more accurate. But the way that it's written, the way Melanie and Wanda have like walls and they're trying to like Melanie's trying to hide memories and then Wanda's trying to access them, and it's so intriguing. This book is so intriguing. I read it as a teenager and I was like, wow, this feels really relatable for some reason. I wonder. But it's such a phenomenal book. The premise is basically these kind of alien microbes have infected Earth and they're using the bodies, the human bodies, as hosts. And the humans are obviously fighting back. But then they come to understand where each other's is coming from. Because obviously Wanda is like, I don't understand what's happening here because we're a peaceful species. And Melanie is like, well, I don't know how you don't understand, because this is like quite an invasive process. It's kind of, you know, colonialism, and that's kind of bad. I love how Stephanie Meyer writes souls, and that soul is external to the brain because that's actually being debated by a lot of scientists, neuroscientists, philosophers, is like, are they separate or are they together? And we, having DID, obviously think that they're separate. Like, that's just logical to me that they would be separate, and the brain is more like a tool, and that we kind of are in the brain and control it, and it's, you know, like a machine, like a computer. And consciousness is like the energy that powers the computer. So it's kind of like, that's how we see it, and that's how Stephanie kind of portrays it. And in this book, humanity is losing. So they have to work together, but they can't do it on their own. They have to have help from Wander, who's of the alien species. And it's just, I don't know how to explain this book. As I'm saying it out loud, I'm like, I'm not really encapsulating the magic of this book. I think the reason why I like this book is kind of the same way I like The Hunger Games. It really encapsulates the worst of humanity and the best of humanity in the same book. We see selflessness, we see self-sacrifice, but then we also see violence and betrayal, and I really think this book explores the human psyche and consciousness and the human condition all in the one book. And kind of like at the start of this video, where it's like, if you're feeling that kind of hopelessness of like, I feel like humanity is going down the shitter, and you're kind of one of those people that jokes that like in 50 years we won't even have a planet. Wrong. Wrong. Yes, there will be a planet. Hashtag YOLO is just a capitalist mindfuck. It's not real. Like, life does go on. It's not going to end. And history shows us this. Do you know how many times humans have thought the world was going to end and then it didn't? So there's no point kind of going through life going, the world's going to end. No, it's not. And you should act as if it is still going to continue to be here, because it will be, even when humans are almost going extinct. The next category is Against All Odds, and the two books I picked are Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir and Chinese Cinderella. And this is the only book that I don't have a physical copy of, but Chinese Cinderella by Adeline Yenma. And we first read this book in 8th grade. It was, oh my God. I've never felt so understood and so devastated at the same time. And at so many points, you think this protagonist is not going to make it. And it's just like, how is this kid still going? And then she's finally away from her family and she's doing well and she gets pneumonia. And you're like, for fuck's sake, like, how much more does this little girl have to suffer? And yet she turns that suffering into something beautiful. The character wants to become a writer, and then obviously it being autobiographical, it comes full circle because Adeline obviously became a writer and like wrote and published that book, and she dedicated it to all unwanted children, and then wrote this beautiful dedication note. And even though I was forced to read it for school in grade 8, I've read that book 50 times since then. It's a book that I always return to every time where I'm just like, I can't take any more that's thrown my way. I love reading about books where the characters survive no matter what. The characters keep going and the characters end up getting and achieving their goal. Also, if you're Australian, it's probably in your local library, because we had to read it for school, and our school wasn't the only one that was reading that book. Like, you will find it in your local library. Project Hail Mary. I don't want to talk about this one too much just because it is getting turned into a film that's getting released March next year. So excited. This was a recent read for us, and this is what kind of also inspired this video, because holy shit, this book. The protagonist, we wake up chapter 1, he's in this sterile white room. There's 2 dead bodies over there. He's naked and he doesn't remember himself, and he's got this kind of robot claw trying to look after him. And he's like, where the fuck am I? Turns out he's in space, and he's kind of flicking between like him figuring out why he's in space and who he is and what he's meant to be doing there, and the flicking back and forth, and then his life on Earth and what led up to Project Hail Mary, which is what's on his NASA badge. This book is so good. No, genuinely, at first I struggled. I'm not gonna lie, at first I struggled, because it's written by a space nerd. And I love that for him. I love that for Andy. But also, this book is like if I wrote a book on Taylor Swift and being like an autistic, like having all of these like random ass Taylor facts that are not relevant to the story, but the way I'd be cramming everything in just to be like, look how much I know. That's what Andy kind of does. Like, there's so much science, which is great because it's a sci-fi novel, but there's so much science that like it's just kind of slipped in there that isn't kind of relevant. Like, a lot of it is, but there's like a couple of things where I'm just like, bro, relax. Okay, there's a lot of information coming at me at the moment, but I wanted to watch the movie next year, and I wanted to read the book before I watched the movie, and I was like, I have to get through this book somehow. And then I imagined my high school chemistry/biology teacher. He taught both, and oh my god, very cool teacher. Didn't just talk about science, talked about everything. Very much like a safe kind of cool teacher, but also like taught science in a way that was like easy to understand. And I used his voice to narrate this, and suddenly, easy read. If you didn't have a cool science teacher, you can imagine the teacher from Twilight.
Separate and label them into the phases of mitosis. And the first partners that get it right are gonna win. Oh, the golden onion.
The biology teacher who's like, compost is cool. Imagine him reading this book, and then suddenly it's just so much easier to read. The reason why it's on this list is because shit goes wrong, he fixes it. Shit goes wrong, he fixes it. Like at the start of the book, when they're kind of like, we've just worked out that the sun is losing light at a very rapid rate. And then they find out that these little rocks, like these little kind of microalgae aliens, are eating the sun. And like, that's not really great. Because obviously while all of this is happening, what's being reported on is different to what they're actually doing behind the scenes. And he can't tell his students that he's teaching, hey, I'm actually working on this micro rock algae, because they're like, oh, you know, my dad says that climate change doesn't exist. That this whole like space alien thing is like a hoax, like a government conspiracy. And meanwhile, he's working behind the scenes. And so every time where I'm just like, there's this major global issue, and even though it's being reported on this way, I have to trust that actually behind the scenes people are doing things about it. And I have to believe that because as a human, that's what I choose to believe in. I choose to hope that people who have really amazing minds designed to fix this specific problem will be contacted to work on it. That's how I get through life. And this book really just enforces that humanity is always working. It doesn't matter what's actually being reported, what's actually being said. Often it's not the whole truth because they're trying to make it digestible to the public, but you just have to kind of believe that people are working on solutions, even if they're a stretch, even if it's a Project Hail Mary, even if it's just like, oh my God, there's no way we'll be able to pull it off. Humanity as a collective is smart enough to pull it off. The next category is whimsy fiction. I've got A Magical Girl Retires by Park So-yeon and We'll Prescribe You a Cat by Sho Ishida. We'll start with We'll Prescribe You a Cat. If you haven't read Japanese fiction before, that's fine. At the moment, the trend in Japanese fiction is to have a concept and then approach the concept from different perspectives. This concept existed before the book, Before the Coffee Gets Cold, but Before the Coffee Gets Cold definitely trailblazed the current trend that we're seeing. So the concept for We'll Prescribe You a Cat are different people who have their own different unique issues who all go to this same clinic, and this psychiatrist is like, oh, I know exactly what you need. Here is a cat, and here's a bag with food for the cat and a toy for the cat. And the cover just makes me laugh because it's one of these orange, like, we don't have these in Australia, our meds come in boxes. But in America and Japan, I would assume, with the label being Japanese, the medications, psychiatric medications come in these orange bottles. And then out of it's just like all of these cats. I've put it in the whimsy fiction because it just made me laugh. It just made me laugh and cry. And like, I do think that animals can be medicine. I am not personally an animal person. I'm a cat person and I like cats. Any other animal, I'm not really a fan. I'm not a dog person. I'm not a bird person. I'm not a fish person. And I think this book is just so good at like all of these people who have their own different circumstances, who perhaps if you're someone who's, you know, tried medication and it didn't work for you, or someone who's like really depressed but you're anxious about taking new medication, or you're anxious about therapy, this is a really good starter book for just like exposure to the kind of, yes, it's an unconventional practice, but just opening that dialogue, because mental health is still a stigmatizing conversation, even though there's kind of like this facade that we've kind of cured it by like, oh, it's so open to talk about your mental health now. And it's like, no. Like, unless you've got depression or anxiety, people are across those two disorders. Anything else, everyone's just like, oh, no, I didn't want to know. I don't want to hear about that. Very hard to have a conversation with someone who's like uncomfortable. And I think if you're someone who has quite a solid state of mental health, good for you. Maybe by reading about other people's therapy experiences or what other people are going through, you might go, huh. Now, these are both translated works of fiction. The Count of Monte Cristo is also a translated book. It was originally written in French, but it's kind of been around so long, it's hard to remember that it is translated work. We'll Prescribe You a Cat, translated Japanese fiction. Magical Girl Retires, translated Korean fiction. I love reading East Asian fiction just because it's normally quite whimsy. It's normally quite hopeful. And that's because like culturally you have to understand that the work-life balance in Korea, Japan, mainland China is very much like you work and then you go home, and then you work, and then you go home, and you go to work, and then your boss says, hey, let's go out for drinks. And you can't really say no. You kind of have to go. And that's from personal experience. I did a really long teaching day from 7 a.m. till 7 p.m. and I was bone tired. And then my boss was just like, let's go out for drinks. And I was like, no thanks, I'm about to collapse from exhaustion. And they were like, do you value your position? Because there are other foreigners that we can, I was like, oh my God, okay, fine. But like culturally, going out for drinks with your boss is kind of so that you can talk about your like performance. It's kind of like an unofficial performance review, but also where you can like talk freely and be like talking about like the parts that you're actually struggling with, and it promotes like that kind of bonding, open communication. But it does mean you spend a lot of time in work mode and not so much play mode. And that's why I love reading East Asian fiction so much, because a lot of it does center on like whimsical play. This book, for example, it starts with 29-year-old protagonist standing on the bridge, and she's like, you know what? I've had enough. I've had enough of this hellscape. I'm in debt. I took out money for loans, something that I actually needed to live, and now I can't pay it back. And she's struggling, and she's like, you know what? 29 years old, it's not going to get any better than this. And then she's on the bridge and a taxi pulls up, and this woman gets out of the taxi and she's like, stop, don't yourself. Your destiny is to become a magical girl. Like just I read this in an hour. Like I was so invested. The way Soryeon was just able to create a magical system that makes sense, a world that works, like the kind of stakes are so high. Global warming is even tackled in this book. Like this book is so thin and it goes through so many elements, and I finished it and I was like, what a ride, what a roller coaster, what a journey. Also, I'm feeling really great about being a human, and I want to be a magical girl too. Hello, Sailor Moon. Fifth and final category, understanding therapy reads. Again, for people who haven't been to therapy, these books are good to understand people who do go to therapy better. And for people who are already in therapy, these books help you feel connected to the experience. Starting with 죽고 싶지만 떡볶이는 먹고 싶어. I want to but I want to eat tteokbokki. Now, we bought this book back in 2018, pre-English translation. We have not read the English translation. We have only read the Korean one, and our Korean wasn't fluent when we read this book. If you've not learned a language before, then you might not kind of relate to this experience, but there's a moment when you're learning a language where you are learning vocab and grammar, and you're really just learning pieces of the puzzle, and then eventually you'll look at something and all of those pieces slide into place and you'll go, oh, I can read a sentence. This book was the first time we read Korean and understood it immediately. In 2018, we were just sitting there on Tumblr and an ad pops up and it's just like, oh, you've been looking at these textbooks. Have you also considered reading Korean fiction? And the first book that came up was this book. And I was just like, I think I know what that means, because my brain is telling me that means I want to, but I want to eat tteokbokki. And I'm like, no, something must be wrong, because like there's no way a book is actually called that. It was. I put it straight into Pleco and it said what it said, and I was like, oh my god, fluency is achievable. This book is also kind of autobiographical. It is a kind of transcript between the author and her psychiatrist. I really commend Pek Se for really kind of being so vulnerable and so open and just really being like, hey, I don't feel like I'm doing enough, and I don't feel like I really fit in, and I don't really even feel like a person some days. Very, very intimate, very vulnerable. And the whole time I was reading this, I was just like, I get it. I get you, because 2018 is also the first year we started going to therapy. So it was just hit all of the points. Like I said, there's an English translation. I haven't read it, but I assume it's good. People have raved about the English translation as well. So definitely something I would be recommending on a list characterized by hopeful books. Final book on the list is Silver Linings Playbook by Matthew Quick. I normally detest movie covers, but for Jennifer Lawrence and Bradley Cooper, I make an exception. I do. They're both beautiful people, and I'm happy having them on the front cover of this book. This book is so good. It's definitely dated in some areas. And if you think mental health through a 2005 lens versus mental health through a 2025 lens, that's where the datedness comes in. But this book is just so good. If you want a more kind of modern version, if you don't feel like you can read about someone who was going to therapy in 2005, the movie is a very good, updated, kind of modern version. It carries the exact same essence. It's a gorgeous book to movie adaptation, very accurate. Love. Love, 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 love. The book follows Pat. Pat has just come out of a psychiatric facility and he's been recently diagnosed with bipolar. A hard diagnosis to get as a 35-year-old, but he's working with it. Pat's back living with his parents, he's back in his hometown, he's trying to work on himself, and he really has this goal of reconnecting with his ex-wife. He doesn't know that they're divorced yet, but he wants to connect with her. And this book is about helping Pat find other tethers, other hyperfixations, other things to focus on, because you can't set your life around a singular person. And that's not just a Pat thing, that's an everyone thing. You shouldn't be focusing all of your energy onto one person. Like, you have to focus on yourself too. You have to have other connections to live a healthier lifestyle. And watching Pat go from the beginning of the novel to the end of the novel and really overcome every hurdle, and also going from not taking his meds to taking his meds every day because he's realized that they actually help and there's no shame in taking them. Like, this book really just destigmatizes mental health. It really does. And if you are someone who's been diagnosed with a disorder, specifically bipolar as well, I do recommend the movie or the book, because you just feel so understood. Like, because Tiffany as well, Tiffany has a major depressive disorder and she's also lost her spouse, and so the way they both cope is different, and it's really, really interesting. And I really give props to Matthew Quick here, the way people treat Tiffany versus the way people treat Pat. Because people treat Pat and they're like, wow, he was so brave for going to do therapy and treatment, and like, he's working on himself, it's so admirable. And then we see Tiffany also has a psych that she's working with. She's also on medication, and people are just like, oh, what a shame. What a shame about Tiffany. Like, she's crazy, stay away from her, she'll wreck your life. And it's like, the double standard, that actually exists. It exists in real life. Like, yes, men's mental health is stigmatized, but for men who do seek psychiatric care, they are treated a lot better than women. And so I do appreciate that Matthew, actually being a male writer, put that in there. Thank you, love, appreciate. And I love that Pat hears what's being said about Tiffany and actually calls it out. And he's like, wait a second, no, like, you're saying all of this about Tiffany, but Tiffany and I are in the same boat, so why are you saying that about me? And they're like, no, of course not. And it's like, but how can you separate what's happened? So it's very, very good. I love the friendship between Pat and Tiffany and how it evolves, and I think it's really realistic and really hopeful. And if you're someone who is struggling with their mental health and you're like, you know what, no one gets me, this book will get you. That's it for this video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If you have other books you think are really hopeful and uplifting that we didn't mention, leave them in the comments below. It's so nice to be making videos again. You can probably tell, considering it's reflected in the Reputation frame, but we did get lighting, which means that the Melbourne weather isn't going to stop us from filming anymore. Super excited. I've got a backlist of videos I've been meaning to make all year, including Dream Girl Drama by Tessa Bailey, which came out in February, and Tessa's about to release her next book, and I'm like, wow, I am so behind. So that'll definitely be the next video. But until then, bye. Cliff says Sylvia Plath's work is very depressing to read, and that his own daughter had recently suffered through the bell jar because she is taking an American literature course at Eastern High School. And you didn't complain to administration, I asked? About what? About your daughter being forced to read such depressing stories? No, of course not. Why would I? Because the novel teaches kids to be pessimistic. No hope at the end, no silver lining. Teenagers should be taught that life is hard, Pat, and children have to be told how hard life can be. Why? So they will be sympathetic to others. So they will understand that some people have it harder than they do, and that a trip through this world can be a wildly different experience depending on what chemicals are raging through one's mind. I had not thought about this explanation, that reading books like The Bell Jar helped others understand what it was like to be Esther Greenwood. And I realize now that I have a lot of sympathy for Esther. And if she were a real person in my life, I would have tried to help her, only because I knew her thoughts well enough to understand she was not simply deranged, but suffering because her world had been so cruel to her and because she was depressed due to the wild chemicals in her mind.